Hi everyone, my name is Brianne Kozlowski. I recently finished my MA at the University of York, and I wrote my thesis on the stained glass windows here at Bryn Athyn. I'm really lucky to be speaking after Martha and Michael because they've sort of set up the spirit of what was going on here in the creative process. Oh, sorry, thank you. So I'll be picking up about how the windows were created because some very interesting and unique things happened here at Bryn Athyn. The Bryn Athyn Cathedral is known to historians, academics, and conservators alike not only for the architecture and stained glass, but for the Pitcairn family homes on the estate and their plethora of artifacts, as we just learned about. The cathedral is an impressive 20th century neo-Gothic building, of which the cornerstone was placed in 1919. It was financed by John Pitcairn, a wealthy new churchman with a growing fortune from the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company, who hired Ralph Adams Cram as the architect. As Cram's architect involvement terminated before the end of the project, leadership shifted to John's son, Raymond. Raymond's vision, composed of new church beliefs and inspiration from the art and architecture of the Middle Ages, shaped every aspect of the cathedral building. Trips to Europe that Raymond took as a child in art historical scholarship directly influenced his concept. Both the building and glass were erected by on-site guilds, mimicking medieval building methodology and fashionable trends in the arts and crafts movement.
Can you slow down a little bit?
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm very nervous.
Okay. Thank you for telling us.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling us.
The zenith of Raymond's vision is exhibited by the stained glass in the cathedral. There is an uncanny likeness between the Bryn Athyn glass and medieval glass in terms of material and style. However, the Bryn Athyn iconography is wholly original. Here are a few examples of inspiration that was taken from medieval buildings that are refocused into original works at Bryn Athyn. We have this example from the Five Sisters window at York Minster, and a few examples from Lincoln and Auxerre. Lawrence Saint started at Bryn Athyn before going on to create the windows at the National Cathedral. Saint and the glass team conducted much research and relied upon the works of Theophilus, Christopher Wall, and Charles Winston, among others, to aid them. Research and experimentation are the two largest contributing factors to the windows. One of the most well-known facts about Bryn Athyn is that the glass was made on site for over 20 years. The fluctuating sparkling glass found in medieval windows that varies in thickness was not being made in industrialized America, causing Raymond to solve the problem himself. Lawrence Saint recorded the thickness of glass from Chart to aid in the recreation process, and the team consulted glassmakers and manuals. The history of glassmaking at Bryn Athyn will be discussed at length by Ken Leap, so I will only provide a few sentences to aid in the context of this presentation. Hundreds of glass recipes from Bryn Athyn survived, showing exactly which ingredients went into the crucible to achieve glass that was convincingly medieval. The Bryn Athyn glass made was mouth-blown soda lime glass. No receipts exist regarding where raw materials were bought from. It is possible that they were sourced from the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company, where Raymond had connections. Either way, you can see the resultant texture and thickness of the glass made. Thousands of sheets of glass survive in the Bryn Athyn Cathedral basement. These sheets are small, approximately 7 by 11 inches, indicating a small cylinder was blown. The decision to blow small cylinders at Bryn Athyn was likely a calculated one, in order to mimic the small sheets with irregularities characteristic of the medieval period. This decision is all the more interesting considering that American technology at the time allowed for bigger and more efficient sheets of glass to be blown. In terms of the window making process, there are two distinctive elements. Lumieres were employed. This refers to fully painted translucent models of the window obtained from painting studies on thin tracing paper. This was then mounted to a clear sheet of glass, and chalkboard was added to account for the stonework, and it was put into the window, all in an effort to study the effect of light. This was in order to present Raymond with an accurate portrayal of what the window would look like so he could then approve the design. When the design was finalized, cut lines were made and glass was cut, as you would all expect. Next, it was all put together with temporary leading and installed so the color could be studied and pieces changed if necessary. Color, tone, texture, and thickness were often replaced to achieve the desired effect. Although many aspects of the window process were medieval, temporary glazing to assess color for every window was not. Although this is culminating in a wonderful result, the system is very complicated and expensive. The paint decoration is another distinctive aspect of the Bryn Athyn process. It was also made in-house. Several of Lawrence Saint's notebooks survive. As with the glassmaking, technical manuals were also consulted for glass paint. A 1917 report from Saint describes his hunt for information at various libraries, and he references the texts of Westlake, Winston, Wall, Wittick, Fromberg, and Miller. His notebooks reveal experiments with materials like mediums and binding agents discussed by these texts. Saint completed extensive experiments to match medieval paint from the panels Raymond collected. He particularly struggled to replicate what he referred to as Radagon brown, which likely refers to the paint color used in the 12th century panel in the collection now in Glencairn. This panel was acquired by Raymond early on and is now in Glencairn. The visitation panel was on the bench as a guide for Saint, and his notebook sought to reproduce the paint color. Saint also struggled with the color he called Methuselah, named after the paint on the Methuselah window at Canterbury Cathedral. These entries comprise an entire notebook dated from 1927 to 1928. Saint actually copied the entire Methuselah window for Glencairn. This gave him the opportunity to directly work off a historic window, and information from the Methuselah experiments likely affected the glass paint used in the cathedral windows. The glazing history is disjointed, and very little definitive material outlining the subject exists in the archives. Given the amount of other surviving information, this is unusual. It is possible lead was regarded as a less important matter and the letters or receipts were disposed of. However, it's much more likely that it was a problem with little room for improvement and simply less information exists. Raymond sought to have cast lead made and even obtained a piece of 13th century lead from Canterbury to have analyzed and reproduced. Seemingly, this goal was never attained, and correspondence shows that Raymond wrote back and forth to several lead manufacturers. An interview with a member of the glass department from 1975 reveals that the lead originally used in the church was manufactured by the National Lead Company in New York and was a milled lead that came in 6-foot-long cames. We now know that the windows were re-leaded in the 1940s to account for new glass colors that were made. Otherwise, the lead record is a mystery. The lead in place now in Bryn Athyn is comprised of at least 2 different types, as you can see. The nave grisaille and chancel aisle windows are glazed with 5, 6, and 7 millimeter leads that have a visible seam over the lead heart. The chapel windows are glazed with a plain lead that does not show a seam over the heart. It is unknown what type of lead is used in other parts of the building because the windows were unreachable to me due to height. The bulk of my research really considered the observations of filming and backing. In response to observations of medieval glass character that the Bryn Athyn windows underwent treatment that the staff referred to as processes known as filming and backing. Filming refers to the application of patina of varied composition on the internal side of the window, and backing refers to similar treatments undertaken on the exterior. These treatments were an attempt to control the amount of light filtering through and replicating dirt and corrosion phenomena present on medieval glass. Literature greatly impacted the team's experiments in filming and backing, especially practical manuals. Charles Winston addressed this film, acknowledging it as a method of subduing the brilliancy of old glass. Painting manuals discuss making enamels and how to darken glass to replicate the effects of dirt and weathering. The concept of film and its origin was discussed in art historical literature in the early 20th century. The reigning argument was that films were added by medieval artists and were susceptible to atmospheric conditions because they were made of a less permanent material than trace lines, thus explaining why they were largely lost. The article suggested that a non-vitreous material was applied to give glass tone, but only as a temporary expedient until the glass could take on its natural film of dirt. Importantly, at this time, glass chemistry applied to stained glass was in its infancy, and processes of glass corrosion and factors contributing to it were not widely understood. It is likely that these men confused early stages of degradation or corrosion byproduct for what they called a film and misunderstood the effects of age. Corrosion, weathering, patina, and microorganisms are a few examples of a larger group of issues that plague historic glass and can change its appearance in many ways, masquerading as an intentional film to the 20th century historians. Furthermore, thin layers of paint washes under years of dirt and corrosion could easily be perceived as one entity and misinterpreted as a widely applied medieval practice. Regardless of the origin, filming was thought of by Raymond Pitcairn as an important part of the window-making process. The glass department was experimenting with filming by 1918 and were actively recording the appearance of films on medieval windows in Europe. However, it is important to take into account that the years that the Bryn Athyn team was visiting Europe, many of the cathedrals had not been cleaned. Inevitably, it was not easy to replicate the opaque, dusty nature of the medieval windows. The notebooks regarding filming and backing written by Lawrence Saint reveal that the film and backing were largely made from glass flux and coloring agent applied in various thicknesses and surface areas and fired at a very low temperature. Their surviving films are often very soft in places due to their makeup. Sometimes windows were coated in more than one film to achieve the wanted effect. 1920 correspondence reveals that an unspecified nave grisaille window is coated in more than 3 different films and suggests multiple firings and several very thin layers of glass paint, as shown here. During critical observation of medieval originals, the Bryn Athyn staff noted opaque white areas on the glass, primarily on the exterior, a phenomenon we now know to be often a byproduct of glass degradation. This was recreated at Bryn Athyn through opaque white glass paint or with modeling clay. Historic photographs show the backing as seen shortly after installation. The additional use of putty-based cement also can be arguably included in the filming and backing processes. A worker's description included pulling up the lead flanges and pouring the cement onto the glass and forcing it into position with a scrubbing brush. The excess was then only partially taken off. Photographs show the large amount of excess putty left around the edges of the glass as well on the surface, adding the opaque quality. The aforementioned Radagon notebook, in addition to paint experiments, also shows recipes for the film and backing. Furthermore, there are recipes for what appear to be cold paint and the use of modeling clay, both non-vitreous materials used for artificial aging purposes. Experienced glassmen like Lawrence Saint would have known that a material like modeling clay would eventually wear away from the rain. This inclusion was likely seen as a temporary measure, only to last until the window acquired its so-called natural film of dirt. The successful application of film and backing creates the multi-tonality of windows plagued by age. Some of the Bryn Athyn windows are artfully dressed, while others exhibit subtle splatter marks or painted circles to suggest corrosion pitting. Some later colors of film are employed in a speckled fashion and darker pieces to suggest dirt and dust. The film is sometimes more thickly applied, seemingly with a badger brush, or only partially removed to simulate age. Based on a series of site visits last year, it was found that the windows at the Bryn Athyn Cathedral are stable and in good condition. The cathedral windows are unrestored with the exception, as Martha talked about before, with S5, which was restored by Ken Leap in 2010. The fired film is a complicated issue for future conservation. The recipes show a large percentage of flux, a substance fired at a low temperature. Research has shown the correct flux to pigment ratio is important in determining the long-term stability of paint, or in this case, film. Due to the nature of handwritten recipes, it is difficult to decipher the methods of measurement and subsequent ratios of materials. Based on limited visual inspection, the interior film was generally present, however, much of it is soft and removable only with a mildly sharp tool. Like the glass and paint, there are several different recipes for film, both fired and unfired, and these may behave differently. If conservation is to be undertaken in the future, testing individual areas for stability would be crucial before any cleaning could be undertaken. As has been demonstrated, the lead is an extremely important part of the Bryn Athyn window scheme. Strong and aesthetically appropriate lead was sought, evaluated, and specifically chosen. Scientific analysis and trial and error is a part of the history of the lead. Unsatisfactory leads are replaced, resulting in the lead currently in the cathedral. The lead and solder joints are in good condition with only isolated areas of breakages or cracks. Although some of the windows have become bowed, such issues can be rectified without reletting. Any future conservation should take into account the importance of the lead and avoid removing it, if possible. Another subject for consideration is the glass door in the basement of the cathedral. Thousands of square feet of glass survived, the result of careful experimentation and manufacture, making any conservation-related glass replacement straightforward. However, the basement is damp and humid. As you all know, moisture is the leading cause for degradation, and relative humidity, air pollutants, weathering, and other aspects can all affect the lifespan of stained glass. Appropriate measures should be undertaken to control the humidity of the environment. The most important property for glass is its chemical durability, which is the key to degradation. If corrosion were to appear, the speed of decay could vary due to the differing formulas for each color, which may cause individual glass pieces to degrade at different rates. Not only would this be difficult to manage in the storage areas, but also within a single window. In conclusion, the stained glass in the Bryn Athyn Cathedral is an exceptional example of the craft in 20th century America. An enormous amount of time and wealth were put into creating the stained glass, which was installed over more than 20 years. The window construction included some very distinctive and exceptional aspects, but would not be as remarkable without acknowledging the processes of filming and backing, which deserve special attention. The Bryn Athyn made glass, although convincingly medieval in terms of thickness, texture, and color, lacked the mystery of age. By replicating medieval glass, Pitcairn was suggesting a starting off point for his community and building, almost picking up where the height of the medieval left off and ignoring years of history where faith dwindled. The Bryn Athyn Cathedral windows are very special and impact the history of stained glass in America.